The blood would hit the floor in exactly 47 seconds, and Arya Lane was the only person in the whole restaurant who knew it was going to happen. Her fingers squeezed tighter around the water pitcher as she watched the new bodyguard move his weight behind Alexander Bash's chair. Wrong way to stand, wrong angle, wrong everything. The man's hand moved toward his jacket for the third time in 2 minutes, and Arya's stomach felt like a rock dropping into dark water. She had spent her whole childhood watching the tiny face movements of her mean father, learning to guess when he would explode before his hand even made a fist. She knew what a hunter looked like when it was ready to attack. And this man was not a bodyguard. He was a killer. Arya put down the pitcher with shaking hands and made herself breathe. The anchor room glowed with warm light and quiet richness. All glass chandeliers and leather booths looking out over the Thames. Politicians laughed over wine. Businessmen made deals over expensive steaks. And in the corner booth, Alexander Bash sat like a king holding court, completely unaware that death stood 3 feet behind him, wearing an earpiece and a fake smile. She should walk away. She should pretend she saw nothing. Alexander Bash was a crime lord, a man who made people disappear. A storm wrapped in expensive suits and British politeness. His world was bullets and blood and power games she couldn't begin to understand. If she got involved, she would drown in it. But her little sister's face flashed through her mind. The nights Arya had stepped between Emma and their father's anger. The bruises she had worn like armor so Emma wouldn't have to. She had spent her whole life protecting people, and she couldn't stop now just because the person in danger was dangerous himself. The fake bodyguard's fingers flexed. Arya saw the movement before anyone else did. His weight shifted forward onto the balls of his feet. His pupils got bigger. His breathing changed speed. 47 seconds had become 20. Arya's hands moved without thinking. She grabbed a straw from her apron, tore open the paper wrapper and flattened it against the bar. Her pen scratched 7 words across the white paper. Each letter sharp and clear. Your bodyguard isn't one of yours. She had been brave before. He could be brave again. Arya crossed the dining room with the note folded between her fingers. Her heart pounded against her ribs so hard she thought everyone could hear it. She reached Alexander's table and placed his refilled scotch on the shiny wood, sliding the wrapper beside the glass like it was nothing, like her whole body wasn't screaming at her to run. Alexander's hand moved toward the glass. His fingers touched the wrapper. He paused. Then he picked it up. Arya turned away, forcing herself to walk at a normal speed. Even though every feeling told her to run, she made it 3 steps before she heard the soft sound of paper unfolding. 4 steps before the silence at his table turned sharp and dangerous. 5 steps before she felt his eyes lock onto the back of her neck like a sniper's aim. She didn't look back. She couldn't. If she looked back and saw doubt in his eyes, saw him ignore her warning as worry or attention-seeking, the fake bodyguard would kill him and she would have to live with that for the rest of her life. But then she heard it. 2 sharp taps on the table. The sound cracked through the restaurant like a gunshot. Alexander's real guards moved instantly, their bodies snapping into formation with military speed. They closed ranks around him, hands disappearing inside jackets, eyes scanning the room with sudden deadly focus. The fake bodyguard's face changed. The fake smile disappeared. His hand shot toward his jacket and everything exploded. The fake bodyguard lunged forward, and Arya saw the blade in his hand catch the light like a silver promise of death. Alexander moved faster than any man his size should move, shooting up from his seat and spinning toward Arya. His arm wrapped around her waist, and he yanked her behind him just as the knife sliced through the space where her throat had been half a second before. Chairs crashed. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. The fake bodyguard snarled something in a language Arya didn't understand. His face twisted with anger and desperation. His free hand reached for something else, and Arya saw the gun a heartbeat before anyone else did. Her body moved before her brain caught up. She grabbed the nearest thing, a heavy serving tray left on an empty table, and swung it with every bit of strength she had. The metal connected with the fake bodyguard's wrist with a sickening crack, and the gun clattered across the floor, spinning under a booth. The fake bodyguard's eyes locked on her. Pure hate burned in his eyes. "You," he hissed. Then Alexander's fist connected with his jaw, and the man crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. Silence crashed down over the restaurant. Arya stood frozen, the serving tray still gripped in her white-knuckled hands, her chest heaving with adrenaline and terror and something else she couldn't name. Alexander turned to look at her, and for one endless moment, they just stared at each other across the mess of overturned furniture and spilled wine. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, and they looked at her like she was something he had never seen before. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Arya didn't have an answer. She had just saved a crime lord's life with a straw wrapper and a serving tray, and she had no idea what happened next. The police never came. Within 20 minutes the restaurant was cleared and locked. A sign went up about a gas leak. Money changed hands. Witnesses forgot. The fake bodyguard disappeared into a black van with dark windows. And Arya was told to go home, that everything was handled, that she could forget this ever happened. But when she stepped outside her building the next morning, a black Range Rover sat at the curb like a patient predator. A man in a dark coat stood across the street, his eyes hidden behind sunglasses, even though the London sky was grey and sunless. And on her window ledge, tucked under a loose brick, she found a sealed envelope with no name or address. Her hands shook as she opened it. The note inside was written in sharp, neat handwriting. "They saw your face. I'm sending protection." Arya's blood turned to ice. She looked up at the man across the street. He didn't move, didn't wave, just watched her with the stillness of someone who had watched 1,000 people before and would watch 1,000 more. She was in danger. Real danger. The kind that didn't end with a black eye or a split lip or her father's apologies the next morning. This was the kind of danger that ended with bodies in the Thames and families getting sympathy cards. And it was her own fault for noticing things she shouldn't have noticed. Arya tried to go to work that evening, but her manager stopped her at the door. He pressed an envelope into her hands, 2 months' salary in crisp bills, and told her the anchor room was closed for repairs. His eyes were kind, but his voice was final. She was being paid to disappear. She made it back to her flat and locked every deadbolt. She shoved a chair under the doorknob. She called Emma and made her promise to stay with their aunt in Brighton for a few weeks. She tried to convince herself that if she just stayed inside, stayed quiet, stayed invisible, this would all blow over. The knock came at midnight. Arya stood in her dark kitchen with a knife in her hand and her heart in her throat. The knock came again, patient and unhurried. Not the bang of police or the crash of enemies, just a knock. "Mississippi Arya Lane," a voice said through the door. "My name is Marcus. Mr. Bash sent me." She didn't move. Didn't breathe. "I'm alone," the voice continued. "And I'm here to tell you that you need to come with me. Not because you're in trouble with us. Because you're in trouble without us." Arya's hand tightened on the knife. "I didn't ask for protection." "No," the voice agreed. "You asked for nothing, which is why you're worth protecting." The logic didn't make sense, but something in his tone did. Arya opened the door a crack, the chain still hooked, and found herself looking at a man in his 50s with gray temples and the calm eyes of someone who had seen worse things than scared waitresses with kitchen knives. "Mr. Bash is waiting in the car," Marcus said. "He wants to explain in person." "Explain what?" "Why you're not safe in this flat. Why you're not safe anywhere except with us. And why the men who tried to kill him will absolutely come for you next." Arya's stomach twisted. She wanted to slam the door. She wanted to tell them all to leave her alone. But she had spent her whole life reading people. And Marcus wasn't lying. The fear in his eyes was real. He got in the car. Alexander sat in the back seat like a king in exile. All sharp suit lines and controlled power. He looked at her with those storm cloud eyes and something in her chest twisted painfully. "You saved my life," he said without introduction. "I saw something wrong," Arya replied. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," his voice was flat. "Certain. No one else saw. Not my guards. Not my men. Not the people I pay specifically to notice threats. Just you." He leaned forward slightly, and in the dim light of the car she could see the exhaustion in his face. The weight of whatever war he was fighting. "The man you stopped wasn't sent by rivals," Alexander said quietly. "He was placed inside my organization by people I trusted, people who are trying to remove me from power. And when you stopped him, when you saved me, you became a witness to their failure. Which means you became a problem they need to eliminate." Arya's blood ran cold. "They know who I am. They know your name, your address, where you work, where your sister goes to school. Emma." The room tilted sideways and Arya gripped the seat to steady herself. "Emma's safe," Alexander said immediately, reading her panic. I had her moved this morning. She's in a secure location with professional security. She thinks it's a school trip. Arya's eyes snapped to his. You had no right. I had every right. His voice turned to steel. Because you saved my life and I won't let them punish you for it. The car drove through dark London streets, taking her away from everything she knew, away from her flat and her job and her simple life of staying invisible. She was being pulled into a world of violence and betrayal and power. And she had done it to herself by writing 7 words on a straw wrapper. What happens now? She asked. Alexander looked at her for a long moment. Now you stay alive and I figure out which of my people I can still trust. The penthouse was all steel and glass overlooking the city lights. Guards stood at every entrance. Cameras watched every angle. Arya felt like a prisoner in a fancy cage, pacing the marble floors while men with guns discussed her safety in hushed tones. She lasted 3 days before she started pushing back. I need to see Emma, she told Alexander when he came to check on her. Not safe. I need to go outside. Not safe. I need to do something other than stare at walls. Alexander studied her with those calculating eyes. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Gratitude, fear, obedience. He tilted his head. Instead, you're angry. I'm angry because I'm being treated like a china doll when I'm the one who saved your life. Arya stepped closer, her chin lifted in defiance. I'm not helpless. I survived 20 years with a father who used his fists when he couldn't use his words. I protected my sister from him every single day. I learned to read tiny face movements and predict violence before it happened because if I didn't, we died. So don't treat me like I'm fragile. Something shifted in Alexander's expression. Respect maybe or surprise. Then help me, he said. Arya blinked. What? You see things others miss. You said so yourself. So help me find the traitor before they make their next move. It was a test or a challenge or maybe just desperation from a man who didn't know who to trust anymore. But Arya saw the opportunity and grabbed it with both hands. Show me everything, she said. Every file, every report, every person who had access to your security. Alexander smiled for the first time since she'd met him. It was a sharp, dangerous thing. Careful, Mississippi Arya Lane. You might just survive this. Arya spent the next 2 weeks buried in information that should have terrified her. Guard rotation schedules, money records, security footage, communication logs. Alexander's world spread out before her like a dark tapestry, and she studied every thread. And she started to see patterns. A guard who called in sick every Tuesday, the same Tuesday that shipments went missing. Receipts that didn't match delivery schedules. Money moving through fake companies in amounts that made no sense. Phone calls made from secure lines to numbers that pinged off towers in places Alexander's men never went. She mapped it all on paper, connecting dots that everyone else had missed because they were looking for obvious betrayal. But Arya knew that the worst betrayals were the quiet ones, the ones that smiled at you while sliding a knife between your ribs. On day 14 she found it. Elias Ward, she said, dropping the file on Alexander's desk. He looked up from his laptop, confusion flickering across his face. Why, Lieutenant? Elias has been with me for 8 years. Exactly. Arya spread the papers across the desk. He's been with you long enough to know every weak point, every rotation, every safe house. Look at the pattern. She walked him through it piece by piece. The way Elias had slowly separated Alexander from his most loyal guards. The money irregularities that all traced back to companies Elias had recommended. The way the assassination attempt had happened on a night when Elias had specifically suggested changing the guard rotation. Alexander's face turned to stone as he read. When he looked up, his eyes burned with cold fury. He's planning a coup, Alexander said quietly. He's planning to use me as bait, Arya corrected. Look at the timing. He wants to kidnap me, embarrass you publicly and use it to prove you're weak. That you can't protect your own people. It'll give him the reason he needs to challenge your leadership. Alexander stood slowly, his hands flat on the desk. How long do we have based on the pattern? Days, maybe hours. Then we move first. But Elias was already moving. The convoy was ambushed on Tower Bridge in broad daylight. 3 black vans boxed in the Range Rover and masked men poured out like ants from a kicked nest. Arya heard the guards shouting, heard gunfire crack through the air, and then her door was ripped open and hands grabbed her. She didn't scream. She fought. Her elbows slammed into the nearest attacker's nose and she felt cartilage crunch. She twisted, using her small size against them, and kicked another man in the knee hard enough to hear something pop. Someone grabbed her hair and she reached back, found his face, and dug her thumbs into his eye sockets until he screamed and let go. She ran toward the bridge barrier, toward the CCTV camera she knew was positioned at the northeast corner. She waved her arms, making herself visible, disrupting the blind spot they'd chosen for the ambush. Alexander was watching. If his people were monitoring, they would see. Hands caught her again and slammed her against a van. Her vision exploded with stars, but through the pain and the chaos, she heard the sound of an engine roaring closer. Alexander's car screamed onto the bridge like a bullet. He was out before it fully stopped, gun in hand, his face transformed into something primal and terrifying. His men flanked him, turning the ambush into a war zone. Alexander fought his way to her with brutal efficiency, each movement precise and lethal. When he reached her, he pulled her behind him, his body a shield between her and the bullets that tore through the air. "You all right?" he demanded, not taking his eyes off the attackers. "Elias isn't trying to kill you," Arya gasped. "He's trying to replace you. This is theater. He needs witnesses." Understanding flashed in Alexander's eyes. He spoke into his radio, giving commands, changing tactics. Instead of killing the attackers, his men started capturing them, collecting evidence, building a case. When the last attacker fell, Alexander turned to Arya. His hands cupped her face, checking for injuries, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Fear. Not for himself. For her. "Never again," he said roughly. "You don't leave my sight. Not until this is over." Arya found Elias's location 3 days later. She noticed that a warehouse in Rotherhithe received deliveries every Tuesday at 2 a.m., but the delivery list showed the goods leaving through the north exit. Except the north exit had been blocked by construction for 6 weeks. Someone was hiding something in that building, and the pattern of fake companies connected to the warehouse led straight back to Elias. "He's there," she told Alexander. "And he's expecting you." Alexander looked at the map she'd marked up, seeing the trap she'd identified. 2 exits blocked, 1 left open on purpose. A funnel, a killing field. "Then we changed the approach," he said. "They went in at dawn when the light was gray and uncertain." Alexander's men moved like ghosts through the building, avoiding the obvious paths, following Arya's alternative routes. She had studied the blueprints until she knew every pipe and duct and blind corner. They found Elias in the center office, sitting behind a desk like he owned the place. 6 armed men surrounded him, and through the window, Arya saw the glint of metal on a rooftop across the street. "Sniper." Alexander walked toward the window, toward Elias, and Arya saw the angle. Saw the shot line up. Saw the way the morning sun would hide the muzzle flash just long enough. He didn't think. She launched herself at Alexander, her shoulder hitting his chest, her momentum carrying them both sideways. The window exploded. The bullet passed through the space where Alexander's heart had been 1 second before. They hit the floor in a tangle of limbs. Gunfire erupted. Alexander rolled on top of her, covering her body with his, shouting orders while his men took down Elias's guards with brutal precision. When the shooting stopped, Alexander pulled back just enough to look at her. His hands framed her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone where blood trickled from a cut. "You saved me," he said, his voice raw. "Again. We're even now," Arya managed. "No," he shook his head slowly. "We'll never be even because you keep saving me and I don't know how to repay someone braver than all my men combined." Elias was captured alive. His coup collapsed. The traitors in Alexander's organization were rooted out one by one, and the evidence Arya had collected made sure none of them would ever threaten Alexander again. It was over. Arya stood in the penthouse a week later, packing the few belongings she'd collected during her stay. Alexander had told her she was free to go. No debts, no obligations. She could return to her life, collect Emma, disappear into normalcy. But her hands trembled as she folded her clothes because normalcy felt like a lie now. She wasn't the same woman who had written a note on a straw wrapper. She had fought masked men on Tower Bridge. She had uncovered a conspiracy. She had saved a king. And she had fallen in love with a storm. She heard Alexander enter the room but didn't turn around. "Your sister's waiting at the safe house," he said quietly. "I'll have you both taken anywhere you want to go. New identities if you need them. Money to start over." "That's generous," Arya said, her voice carefully neutral. "It's the least I can do." She turned then and found him standing in the doorway like he was afraid to come closer, like he thought she might break if he did. "You don't need to repay me," Arya said. "You just need to stop pretending you don't feel what I feel." Alexander's mask cracked. The control he wore like armor fell away and she saw the raw truth underneath. "What I feel? Fear. No one has ever protected me," he said softly. "Except you." Arya crossed the room. Each step felt like walking off a cliff. But she'd been brave before. He could be brave again. "I'm not asking for your world," she said. "I'm asking for the truth." "The truth." Alexander's hand lifted, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. "The truth is, you terrify me because you see everything. You see the violence and the blood and the darkness and you don't run. You see me and you stay. And I don't know what to do with someone who chooses to stand in the storm instead of running from it." "Maybe you stop trying to figure it out," Arya whispered. "Maybe you just let me stay." His lips met hers and it felt like falling and flying at the same time. Like danger and safety wrapped into one impossible moment. His hands tangled in her hair and she gripped his shoulders, and for the first time in weeks she felt like she could breathe. When they finally pulled apart, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "If you stay," he said, "there's no going back. My world doesn't offer happy endings." "Good thing I'm not looking for an ending." Arya smiled against his mouth. "Just a partner who doesn't underestimate me." The phone rang, shattering the moment. Alexander answered it, and Arya watched his expression shift from warmth to ice in the space of a heartbeat. "When?" he asked sharply. Pause. "How many?" Another pause, longer this time. "Understood." He hung up and looked at her with eyes that had gone cold and distant. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind where Elias wasn't working alone. His partner just activated sleeper cells across the city. There are 12 targets, 12 locations where my people are stationed, and we have 90 minutes before they all go down at the same time." Arya's mind started racing. "Show me the map, Alexander. If I could find Elias, I can find the pattern in this." He spread the intelligence across the table, and she studied it with the same intensity she'd brought to everything else. 12 locations that seemed random. Different neighborhoods, different security levels, different operations. But randomness was just a pattern she hadn't recognized yet. Her eyes tracked across the map, connecting invisible threads. The locations formed a shape if you knew how to look at them. Not a circle, not a perimeter. A symbol. "It's not about the targets," she said slowly. "It's about drawing your men away from the center." "The center of what?" Arya's finger stabbed down on the map, landing on Alexander's primary estate. The one place every operation ultimately connected to, the heart of his empire. "They're coming for you," she said. "All of this is a distraction to leave you exposed. Elias's partner is finishing what Elias started." Alexander stared at the map and she saw the calculation in his eyes. Saw him weighing options, measuring risks, making the impossible choices that came with the crown he wore. Then he looked at her. "I can't split my focus," he said quietly. "If I pull men to defend the estate, the other sites fall. If I defend the sites, I'm vulnerable here. There's no move that doesn't cost lives." "Then make them choose wrong," Arya said. "Give them a target they can't resist." "What target?" She met his eyes steadily. "Me. Let them think I'm unprotected at one of the outer locations. When they commit resources to take me, you'll know which faction is which and you can end this once and for all." "Absolutely not." Alexander's voice turned to steel. "I won't use you as bait. You're not using me. I'm volunteering because you can't win this fight by playing defense, and we both know it." He stepped closer, his hands gripping her shoulders. "If anything happens to you, then you avenge me." Arya's smile was sharp. "But I'm betting it won't come to that because you're going to be watching. And when they make their move, you're going to end them." The clock on the wall ticked forward. 87 minutes until the attacks began. Alexander looked at her like he was memorizing her face, like he was preparing to lose her. Then he pulled her close and kissed her hard, pouring every word he couldn't say into the desperate press of his mouth against hers. When he pulled back, his eyes burned. "If you die," he said quietly, "I burn this city to the ground. Then let's make sure it doesn't come to that." They moved into position. Arya in a mid-level safe house that looked vulnerable but was actually wired with every surveillance tool Alexander's people could plant. Alexander coordinating from Central Command, his forces split between real defensive positions and hidden strike teams. The minutes crawled past. 73, 68, 54. Arya sat in the safe house living room, every nerve in her body screaming at her to run. But she'd been brave before. He could be brave again. 42 minutes. The lights went out and through the window Arya saw the first shadow moving across the garden. They'd taken the bait. Now the only question was whether she'd survive long enough for Alexander to spring the trap or whether the woman who saw everything had finally missed the one detail that would get her killed. Thank you all for following this story. If you're enjoying it, write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Your support means everything and helps me continue bringing you these stories. Thank you.